Welcome to another episode of the Commerce Lab, the place of everything related to Amazon, FBA, private label, and e-commerce. My name is Vincenzo Toscano, and I'm the founder and CEO of Ecomcy. Today we have another special guest. His name is Danny Carlson, and he's the CEO of 𝐃𝐎𝐍'𝐓 ROI, which is actually a one-stop solution for agency related to Amazon brands. Today's topic is actually going to be around agency growth and location independence, which I think is a very good topic and the number one choice because people want to jump into the e-commerce space and have a business there. Now, without any further delay, let me introduce you, Danny. How you doing today? Thank you for coming.
Doing well. It's awesome we can have this conversation across the other side of the world, London to
Yeah.
Bali there. I was just over there in London, but it took me 25 hours or something to fly out there with a couple of layovers, so it's
Yeah.
not easy. So this call makes it a lot easier.
Thank you for coming. I think for sure once we met here in London in the White Level show, I thought to myself, I need to bring you on because I know you have great experience around growing agencies. I mean, your agency is one of the biggest in the space. You also have one of the biggest knowledge in Amazon related. So I think it's going to be very good to touch all these topics and also to support those people that are in the agency space like myself to understand how to grow the agency, how to also not be dependent on a location, and then go from there. But of course, before we jump into that topic today, I want to always give the opportunity to my guests to learn about you, how you got started into Amazon, how you came to the idea of making an agency, and now, yeah, all that history behind that for sure.
Yeah. So a little bit about my current agency, 𝐃𝐎𝐍'𝐓 ROI. We're about 25 full-time employees here. I currently live in Bali, Indonesia. Been living in Asia for the past 3 years. Originally from Canada, which is a great country, but I just really enjoy the freedom of being in Asia. And there's a little bit less laws and regulations, you could say, here. So
Yeah.
I like
Freedom.
riding fast motorcycles and doing things that maybe you get in trouble from the police for in Canada. Like I
For
used to
sure.
get downhill skateboarding tickets and stuff like that in Canada. So Asia's good. But I really started this agency, I guess it would have been in 2016. So I've been doing this for about 6 years now. Just
Wow.
really as a one person show. I was an Amazon seller at the time,
Yeah.
and any Amazon seller knows that when you're starting selling on Amazon, you're not really going to be paying yourself very much for the first 6 months or a year. You're probably making a lot of investment in inventory and then reinvesting the money that you're making, probably not paying yourself. So that was my situation. And on the side, to make some income, I was just writing Amazon listings and doing the keyword research and stuff like
Yeah.
that because a bunch of my friends were selling on Amazon. So that was making a decent side income, but nothing really big. And then I had my Amazon account suspended. And it was like
Wow.
that for about 3 months in a row. It took 3 months to get that sorted out.
Yeah.
I had to pay a lawyer and all this crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And during that period, I just kind of had to reconsider my situation. So I had zero income for 3 months coming in and had just made some very big, 5-figure payments to a bunch of different suppliers and things like
Yeah.
that. I had negative net worth at the time. So I started to put more
Yeah.
of the attention into the agency just out of necessity to pay the bills, and also because I was a little bit more risk averse after this big event that just happened. So at the time, I think I had one virtual assistant that was just helping me out with the Amazon business in general, and so they just kind of shifted to helping me out with the agency, and it really just grew from there. Like I slowly added. I was doing all the copywriting in the beginning, and then we started to add photography. I just found a photography contractor in Vancouver where I was living at the
That's
time.
great.
Be like, hey, if I sell some Amazon photography contracts, can you fulfill them? And then so
Yeah.
we just did it on a contractor basis, and it really grew organically. Over the 6 years, we've expanded. We now have like a full graphics team of like 6 or 7 graphic designers. We have a bunch of photographers, videographers, a lot of people working on a whole bunch of different things, and it was very incremental. There was never a point where I had
Yeah.
to get investors or throw down a bunch of my own money to make it happen. It just was very organic.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, thank you for sharing all the story. I think is similar to mine. I think usually people that is behind an agency, we always start as Amazon sellers, and then when we see sometimes the risk involved with that, and we start to diversify to also help some people or people reaching out to us, then we discover the agency world, For example, in my case, I fell in love with the model. I mean, just the fact that I can use the knowledge to help other brands that are already succeeding, but bring it to the next level, I think for sure we can find some fulfillment on that. So now let's jump into, of course, the more technical side of the agency in terms of starting it, right? So I think that my first question of the day regarding that topic will be, what do you think, based on the experience that, and of course, all the journey that you went through to opening your agency, what is the main challenge you encounter when starting all this company on your own?
Yeah, I think by far the biggest one, and I'm just being really broad here. We can dive into wherever you want to dive into. But broadly speaking, I was inexperienced in business. And what I mean by that is things
Mm-hmm.
like financial statements, managing cash flow, and
Mm,
building business systems, standard operating procedures, and systematizing things, hiring people, training
yeah.
people, and
Yeah.
then not only hiring and training, but actually like the bigger that we've gotten, we have to start doing things like performance reviews
Mm.
and or otherwise there's someone working for 2 years and they're actually a bad employee and you just don't even know about it, right? There's all
And
of
you're
these
paying.
things
Yeah.
in business that maybe if you went to business school or if you grew up in the corporate culture, just working 10 years in corporate culture, you understand all these business things. I
Yeah.
didn't have any of that. I was a carpenter for 6 years before I started in online business.
Yeah.
So that was certainly the hardest thing for me was just learning the hard way why all of these necessary business systems are super super important, especially the cash flow ones, right? Like I was
Yeah.
bank balance accounting for the first several years of my business. It was like how much money's in the bank. All right, that's my budget for the month,
Yeah.
which is a
Yeah.
terrible way to do it, obviously.
For sure. I mean, yeah, I think it is very challenging. I think most people think that I'm doing an agency just as you mentioned, like doing the listings, the PPC, and all that. But the reality is that it's an actual business, just as any other business. And if you don't get the cash flow, which I have encountered those issues, you encounter yourself thinking that all the money you got in the bank can be used to hire more people or to do a new website, and at the end of the year you encounter yourself making no profits. So I think that's definitely key to manage everything that has to do with the cash flow. Now, I think you touch a very important topic, which is the people, right? I think in the agency, people is number one priority. If you don't have the right people, you can have a team that you've been working for 2 3 years, and if you don't for sure assess the performance, you may end up providing a bad service, which is gonna decrease your retention rate, which I think on an agency is top one priority. So when it comes to building your team and hiring people for your agency, do you have any specific type of method or any specific type of maybe resource in terms of a place where you go to find these people to make sure you can always find the best people for your agency?
Yeah, yeah, great point. So building an agency, really your value and your leverage is people.
Yeah, for sure.
In e-commerce is your product, right? Or
Yeah.
if you're selling courses, then it's totally different, right? But in agency, it's all about scaling people and good people.
Mhm.
So one lesson I learned the hard way, it took me maybe a few years to figure this out, is that it is much better to spend the amount of time, whatever time necessary to find the right person than it is to just say good enough and just take the best candidate out of whatever candidates that you have.
Yeah.
So quite often it'll take 2 months or longer to
Mm.
actually do interviews and go through candidates and find the right person to
Okay.
do it. And that takes going through a lot of different people. That means a lot of different phone screens, a lot of different job interviews.
Yeah.
Like it's a pretty intensive process. It's not easy
Mm.
at all. But
Mm.
definitely do not fall into the trap of I'm tired of looking at resumes. I'll
Yeah.
just take this person because they're the best person that's applied so far. Absolutely a huge mistake. Because if you think about it, if you hire that person and then you're going to have to train them for at least a month before they're
Yeah.
really good enough at their job where they can do it self sufficiently. That's if they're good, they'll be good after a month. And let's say that it takes another month after that to realize that they're just not a good fit. You just wasted 2 months of them potentially creating even worse problems than if you didn't have anybody doing that job at all in the first place, right? It can be a huge mess. So, the way that we always keep good candidates is our agency is built around certain positions that we pretty much always need to fill, right? We have
Okay.
lots of graphic designers, we have lots of photographers, we have videographers and stuff like that. We just always keep job postings up for those positions, even if we're not currently hiring for that. So we're gathering applicants for that. And then they all get sent into a Google spreadsheet, and they're all screened. So we don't even reach out to the people who really don't meet our criteria. So they're all kind of screened. And then we'll send them through a phone screen. If they meet our criteria, then someone will get on the phone with them and just ask them some more basic questions. Just make sure that, you know, everything lines up. They seem relatively sharp. And then there'll be a second interview. And then everyone who actually gets on the second interview, we're asking kind of different questions, really trying to get a feel for, are they actually sharp? The things that you can't tell from someone's job application, right? And then after that, they finally get on an interview with me. And then that's kind of the final stage. So that's a lot of work, right? So imagine doing that over the course of 2 months with hundreds or sometimes more than 1,000 candidates for a position, right? It's pretty intense.
Yeah, I think for sure is. I mean, I feel you. I have been there, and actually, that makes me jump straight away into my next question, which is when you are thinking so much about growing your agency, that you need to hire more people, you need to build your processes, how you keep that from interfering into the performance of your agency in terms of providing the best service to your clients. Because of course, if you start diversifying your time to hire more people or to make training videos for your team or different processes, that's going to take time from you to grow as an agency at more at the high level, right? So what usually your advice in there in terms of to support you through this journey? Maybe you hire somebody that help you with that, or what do you usually implement in this case?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's always different stages of agency growth. So obviously in the beginning, for most people, that's going to be you are kind of the one-man show. You're probably doing the work. You're probably finding the clients. You're closing the clients. You're doing the marketing. You're doing the, you know, financials. You're doing everything, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't take long before that's completely impossible to do everything.
Yeah.
Right. So the
For sure.
traditional way to do it, and probably the smartest way to do it, is the first thing that you should not be doing as the business owner or the agency founder is the client fulfillment work. That
Okay.
is, I mean, it depends on what your agency is, though, right? If your agency
Yeah.
is you're a rocket scientist consultant, you're probably not going to be able to do that, right?
Yeah.
But for most people,
Yeah.
it's much easier to hire out the actual fulfillment for two reasons. One, it's the repeatable thing that you can systematize and you can get someone doing the same thing every day, showing up and doing it, right? That's not
Okay.
where your time is the most valuable. Your
Yeah.
time as a business owner is most valuable spent actually creating the systems, hiring people, and like so many other things, right? The second reason for that is that it's really important that you as the business owner are the one who is like in the beginning, you should be focused on the actual business growth, the sales and the marketing and those kind of things. I've seen a
Yes.
lot of newer agency owners hire out the marketing or the sales way too soon. And then literally the entire life of their business is now reliant on this one Upwork contractor or person that they hired. And if they're not doing a good job, then they
That's
and the
it.
rest of the team that they hired is not going to eat,
Yeah.
which is a
That's
terrible
true.
situation to put yourself in, right? Maybe you're going to get lucky and get a killer salesperson, but I mean, you should be putting your own team's salaries on your own skills and knowledge, right? Because you as a
Yeah.
business owner are probably going to be the best salesperson instead of some person that you hire, right?
Yeah.
Um, so that's a super important thing. Like hiring out the actual fulfillment should be the first thing, and then it's going to change at different stages. So once you're hiring out the fulfillment team, you have different people doing the actual work. You're probably focusing on sales and marketing more.
Yeah.
Then there's going to reach a point where one, there's too much sales and marketing for you to all handle yourself, and then you also have to work on hiring business systems and other things like that. Then at a point, you're probably going to need an operations manager. Maybe at like minimum 20,000 up to like 50,000 a month, you should consider hiring an operations manager to make sure your team is operating the business correctly.
Yes.
Right.
Correct.
So you're not
Yeah.
just constantly managing everything.
Yeah.
So that's a huge piece there.
That's great.
But probably you want to hire the operations manager before letting go of the sales and marketing. The next
Yeah.
step is probably letting go of the sales and marketing and scaling up at least some junior sales reps, people
Okay.
who can handle the easier stuff,
Yeah.
maybe some marketing depending on what you're doing. But it's always got to go in stages like that. It's
Yeah.
never a situation where you can do everything in your entire
All in.
business
Yeah.
And you have to be strategic about which hires you make at which point in your business, because like the example before, you let go of the sales and marketing too soon, then you're just really putting all your chips on the one sales guy that you hired or something.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a good point you touch in there, which is the sales team. I think if you don't have, I mean, even at the beginning where you're on a one-man show, if you're not a good salesperson, you don't have good strategies to grow your agency in terms of finding clients. I think that's for sure a killer, because you can have the best services in the world, but if you don't know how to put your agency out there, your face out there, and your experience out there, I mean, there is no way you're gonna be able to scale the agency. Which actually is gonna now make me jump to this next section within the agency growth strategy, which is how do you advise new agencies starting in the space to find clients and leads? Because the reality is that when you're getting started, nobody know who you are. You have no connections. So it's very difficult to, of course, just send cold emails or try to call random Amazon sellers and see if they want to give you their money, right? So what do you usually advise for those agencies that are right now on that stage?
Okay, so I kind of got a two-part answer to this. The first part is I'll tell you what I did,
Hmm.
but that's not necessarily relevant to today's landscape. So what I did was mostly in Facebook groups, and then also I had a decent amount of friends who were Amazon sellers. Some of them from in-person Amazon meetups, some of them
Okay.
from Facebook groups and like online masterminds and stuff, but people I'd interacted with online. But at the
Okay.
time, this was 6 years ago or so in 2016, it was a fairly effective strategy to be posting valuable content in other people's Facebook groups. So,
Mm,
like other Amazon seller Facebook groups, and you just be valuable there, sometimes make valuable posts, just helping people out and things like that. And then
yeah.
over time, I would build up enough rapport with the group owner. Maybe I'd invite them to be on my podcast or something like that and build a good connection with them. And then we chat about, hey, like, what if I was like the recommended provider, service provider for your group, and maybe we'd
Yeah.
work out an affiliate commission or something. But anyways, like we managed to get our website linked in the like pinned posts of a number of Facebook groups, and that was
Mm,
really what started the entire thing.
mm, that's good.
And that worked great at the time, but I say that with a caveat because in 2022 that strategy has been beaten to absolute death. And yes, it still works. Like some people will totally make it work, but
Yeah.
it's I mean, most people, most Facebook group owners are going to tell you to screw off if you're trying those same tactics. Like a lot of groups, even if you make your own post that seems like it's a post like that,
Happy.
it's just trying to
Yeah.
help people out, they'll just kick you out of the group, right?
Yeah.
So I wouldn't necessarily recommend that, but so the equivalent of that today, I will say a more broad thing because these marketing strategies always change. You shouldn't just focus on posting in Facebook groups and stuff like that. The overall arching strategy of that was organic. Um, how do I put this? Organic, repeatable traffic, right?
Okay.
So think of that Facebook group pinned post with a link to our website in that. It's
Yeah.
organic, meaning we didn't have to pay advertisement for it to be there,
Yeah.
and it's evergreen, right? It stays
Yes,
there, so we don't
for
have
sure.
to keep doing all this stuff every day to make sure that link is still there. It's just there. Months
Yeah.
later, it's still there. A year later, it's still there,
Yeah.
right? So when you're starting out, it's important to focus on the organic stuff because you're still figuring stuff out. You spend money on ads all the time that may or may not work. That's how you get yourself in trouble and max out some credit cards because you still haven't even figured out your business yet, right? But do
Yeah.
ads once everything's figured out and you know that you can convert a customer properly.
Yeah.
Um, so that's always going to change. I'll kind of just leave it at that because the organic strategies are constantly changing. The only thing
Yeah.
I might say is SEO has been maybe the one real constant that for the past 10 or 15 years really has not gone anywhere. Google
Yeah.
SEO is meets all the criteria that I just said. It's just really hard to get going. It just takes time to actually
Yeah.
get momentum.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, those are very good tips. I think nowadays, especially in the agency space, and as you mentioned, in Amazon, if you try to just spam post and do advertisement, I don't think it's working anymore. I think it's more about being, as you mentioned, building an organic audience, which is gonna take time. It's not easy money, it's not easy traffic, but I think if you do it over a certain period of time and you build a reputation, for sure, as you mentioned, people just gonna come to you and you don't even need to look for them, which is at the end of the day the end goal, right, for any agency. Now,
Yeah, well, and just to illustrate that point a little bit more, I'll share with you guys one of my friends who has been very successful in multiple businesses. He at one point built an entire team of I think about 150 sales reps
wow,
off of mostly Instagram DMs, like Instagram and Facebook
that's
DMs, and then
great.
selling products to people. So he was renting out 2 entire floors of an office building of all
Wow.
these sales reps to go DM people and sell them stuff, and that was working amazingly for a year, maybe about a year and a half. And then it just dropped off a cliff. It just became super ineffective because everybody started doing it. And I'm sure
Yeah,
everyone who uses Instagram now has, a couple spam DMs in their DMs
people don't even
most
read
days,
them anymore.
right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right. And so it just stops working. It stops working. And then Instagram starts cracking down on people who are randomly DMing people. They're making filters and all this stuff. So that's a great example of it's an organic strategy. It's great, but don't expect that to be the strategy that's going to work 5 years later, because things online change very quickly, and what's
Yeah,
working is going to be copied,
for sure.
a matter of weeks or months later, not 5 years later.
Yeah, somebody's gonna make a course, sell it for $10,000, and then that's it.
Exactly.
Great. So let's say, okay, we figure out how to find clients, leads, everything is going great. But then I see the number, most important thing in an agency business, which is retention. So you find clients, you bring them on board, but within 2, 3 months, they leave, they leave, they leave. You cannot keep them. I know most of the time, of course, has to do with performance, but at the same time, sometimes it's also the experience you give to the client, right? The deliveries, the expectation, things like that. So, do you have maybe some tips around what would your advice to an agency in terms of retention strategies to ensure you don't lose those clients just after 2, 3 months? Because the reality is that if you lose all your clients so soon, it's difficult to scale an agency long term. So, what do you think about that?
Yeah, so I mean, the reality is that if you're not getting the results that the clients paid for, then they're
Mhm.
not going to stick with you long term, right? They might stick around a few months later, but I mean, results are obviously important, but interestingly, they're not the most important thing. I would argue that even more important than that is the client relationship, the kind of rapport and the trust that you have with that client, because like most clients can understand, like things are not always going to go right. There's going to be things that go wrong here and there. But as long as you have a good relationship with them, you are, if things are not going the way that they planned, that you are communicating that to them, you're being understanding, you're
Mm,
coming up with solutions, and you're clearly on top of it and communicative, then you can get around those situations that are, maybe it's a 1 or 2 bad months. You can get around those situations as long as there's good communication and a good path to getting back to the results.
yeah,
But even if you have really good results, like your results are killing it, but you're not killing it on the communication game and the client rapport game and all of those things, then some of those clients will just cancel
yeah,
because, like, to them, maybe they don't understand the results, right? They're hiring an agency. They clearly don't understand all the intricacies of
yeah,
what you're doing, or else they might be doing it themselves or hiring a team
yeah,
internally
for
to do it
sure.
themselves, right?
Yeah,
So a lot of the value that you're providing to the clients is just reassuring them consistently, like showing them like, hey, this is what the value that we're doing for you. Or if it's not going properly, then hey, this is what's not going properly, like being transparent about it, communicating what your plan is and what you're going to do, and being honest and updating. Like that is just as important, if not more important, than actual results that you give to the
mm,
clients.
yes, yes. I think for sure that's the number one thing I always mention when people ask is that maybe your results are not perfect, but if you, as you mentioned, are resourceful, that you find solution, let's try this other strategy, you meet with the client, you send more things that they're expected to receive on a monthly basis, for sure they're going to understand that this is a business and things can go up and down, but as long as you're always there with them, they might understand and stick with you for longer, right? And after 2, 3 months having a poor communication, for sure they're going to leave you.
Yeah, well, and a lot of that starts in the sales process. So you can build a lot of that trust and rapport when you're on a sales call with a client. If you're going to sell them a monthly retainer or something like that, just be open and honest with setting the expectations. You don't
Yeah,
want to
that's
sell them
big.
at any cost and then just have them be disappointed, because if their expectations are not met, bottom line, they're going to be dissatisfied, right? So
Mm.
it's better to set realistic expectations, even if they're less likely to make the sale, right?
Yeah,
Because then it's not real. You're getting them to make the sale by over promising, and then you're
yeah,
probably going to under deliver, right?
yeah,
And it also builds trust,
yeah,
especially entrepreneurs. If your clients are business owners and people in business, they're used to a lot of bullshit, right?
yeah,
There's a lot of BS artists out there who are over promising and under delivering, so they're kind of used to that, right? It's
yeah,
refreshing to be truthful and say something along the lines of, yeah, and to be honest, like, I can't promise that you're going to,
yeah,
get like down to 50% of your ad spend or whatever it is that
yeah,
you're looking for. Like, realistically, we're probably going to be able to get somewhere around here, and
yeah,
it's going to take us about 2 months. And in fringe cases, if you're a little bit unsure that you can get them the result, just be honest with that,
yeah,
right? And if they choose not to go with you, then it's probably better that they weren't a client of yours, because then they're just going to be unsatisfied. You're going to have to deal with them later, and it's going to be a big headache, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
if you're honest with it, you're pushing away the people that you should be pushing away, and you're gaining more trust and credibility with
yeah.
the clients that are going to go with you anyways.
Yes. Yeah, we have found that the same when you are transparent, even if you cannot promise the results, but you explain the reality why you can promise and the complexity of the project, most of the time they might understand you if they're entrepreneurs and still give you a shot. So that's for sure a good thing. Now let's start maybe just shifting the topic towards the location independence part of the of today's episode, because I know it's a big thing related to agency and also e-commerce in general. The reality that most people want to do e-commerce and agency because it gives you the freedom to move around and do whatever you want with your location. And I know that's a big thing for you as well. So I wanted to start touching on that in terms of why for you it's so important to have a location independence and how you have seen that benefiting you as an entrepreneur in the long term.
Yeah, location independence for me, I guess it started with just traveling in general. So when I was younger, in my early 20s, my life was really dedicated to downhill skateboard racing. That was my big thing. So like racing longboards down the roads, usually against 4 to 6 other riders at the same time at speeds of up to 115 kilometers an hour or so. And that was really fun. And I got to explore a lot of different countries. I think we went to about 16 different countries through my racing career. And I just saw so many different places and different ways of living. And then when I would come back to, I was working as a carpenter in Vancouver at the time, it was just became very monotonous, right? As a carpenter,
Yes.
you're building a house for, 3 up to 6 months or a year or longer, and you're showing up to the same place every single day, doing just about the same thing most days, right?
Yeah.
And there's very little variability in what you're doing. There's not really room for creativity or anything like
Yeah.
that. And it just wears down on you after a while. And especially like myself being a person in my early 20s at the time, I just didn't see any examples of people in my line of work that I wanted to emulate. It just
Mm.
seemed depressing to me. Like most of them were miserable older guys in their 40s that
Yeah.
just, you could tell that they were beat down from this career that they've been doing. So I knew I didn't want to do that. And then it was Tim Ferriss's 4 Hour Work Week book that kind of hit me over the top of the head with, to
Mm.
me at the time, was completely new opportunity of creating an online business. That was a
Yeah.
completely novel idea for me. And that just I kind of became obsessed with that and started learning all about that, because up until that point, I just really didn't see that as an opportunity.
Yeah.
Like earlier when I was even younger, I wanted to become a musician. I was a drummer. I was actually a decent
Okay.
drummer, but that was kind of the only alternative that I thought of before that, or be a longboard racer. Um,
Yeah.
and so I just really knew that I would never fit into just your regular corporate job or your career that you retire from when you're 55 years old. That just
Yeah.
never excited me. So the whole idea of an online business to me was just more freedom in general.
Yeah.
Location independence is a part of that. Like I can go do my work from wherever I want, which is awesome. Like
That's
I've
great.
been living in different places in Asia for over the last 3 years,
Yeah.
and travel to some other countries and just bring my work with me. That freedom is amazing. But then also it's more freedom in so many other ways too. Like
Mm-hmm.
owning your own business, you have a lot of freedom to design your business in a way that's going to align
Mm,
with the way that you want to live your life.
for sure.
So like
Yeah.
currently what I'm doing is different from the past couple of years, because the past couple of years I was very focused on growth. I was like, I just want to grow this bigger and bigger and just like expand the team and expand the
Yeah.
revenue and all that kind of stuff. And I've
Yeah.
shifted gears now over the past 6 months or so. I'm being like, okay, like I don't want to grow this thing bigger. I'd rather systematize and make things smoother and a little bit
I
less
enjoy.
chaotic and
Yeah.
just enjoy more. Right?
Yeah.
You don't have that freedom as a carpenter or working a desk job at corporate uh, some corporate man or something like that. It's and that
Yeah.
was really attractive to that, right? I like
Yeah.
freedom is probably my highest value. So the online business was really the thing that can deliver that freedom in so many different ways.
Yes, yeah, totally agree. I think the people that also sometimes question themselves with having so much freedom and location, in terms of freedom, in terms of location as well, is that of course this can be beneficial in terms of you adapting your life and everything around that, but at the same time it can actually affect you negatively, right? Because if you start having so much free time in terms of things of your own time and you start moving around, maybe you get distracted by parties or beach or events, festivals, so many things you can do when traveling. I think can actually also be negative for scaling your business. So my question now is how you ensure that having this freedom in terms of location and time doesn't affect your performance in terms of your business.
Yeah, so there's like kind of a misconception I think of people who do what I do, that it's like the digital nomad, I think is the term for it, right? People think of a
Yeah.
digital nomad and they think of someone who's every month or every couple months are going to a new country and then they're always
Yeah.
doing all this traveling and experiencing and stuff. And there's lots of people who do that. There's nothing wrong with that. Like lots of people in Bali at the co-working spaces are doing that. And
Hmm.
that's great. But like personally, I've been more, you'd probably consider me more of an expat. I spent
Mm,
95% of my time in the last 3 years have been in Indonesia
that's
in
great.
one place. And so I have, friends that I've known for the past 3 years. I like
Hmm.
know all the good gyms, the coffee shops, the good co-working spaces and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And that to me is really important, because if I'm constantly switching cities, it's very difficult to get in any kind of groove and actually be productive. Like if I go to Singapore, for example, for a week, it'll take me at least a couple days to really get into the groove of like, okay,
Mm,
so I checked into my hotel and now we got to figure out, okay, I'm going to try out this workspace. Oh, that's actually not that good, but I'll try to work here anyways, and like
yeah.
check out this gym. And then like it takes quite a bit of effort to get into that. And then you don't really know as many people there and stuff. So I think the main benefit really is just being able to choose where you're going to live, right? And if you
Yes.
want to travel and everything, that's possible and do that. But like personally, I prefer to just kind of settle into a place, have some friends there, know the good things to do, and actually live there, right?
Yes.
But if I was still a carpenter, then I'm only able to do that in Canada. That's the one place I could maybe move to the other side of Canada. But if we're
Yeah.
being honest here, Vancouver is the only place in Canada I really care to live. The rest of Canada is not as good as Vancouver, so
Yes.
um, it's the freedom.
Great. Yeah, I think that's amazing. I think of course with also in terms of having the freedom with location, we also get a lot of the questions, at least on my side. Sometimes people ask me, what location you usually advise for people that want to do an e-commerce and agency in terms of which country gives you the most flexibility or the most support, or the biggest community, and that actually bring me to this other question I have for you, which is I know you have been traveling around and I'm pretty sure you have already experienced in terms of different communities and different countries, and you have discovered maybe what is the most efficient in terms of the commerce space. So this is do you have any advice in terms of which are the countries that maybe you can think right now that you would advise for somebody that wants to start another life in terms of the e-commerce space?
Yeah, so I would only look at it in terms of like e-commerce if you were just going to obsess yourself with work all day and just only do that. If you want to focus on e-commerce, really any big city in the entire world is going to have an e-commerce community, and that's going to be pretty good, right?
Yes.
If you're looking as far as like expat communities, Bali's got a pretty good one. Chiang
Yes.
Mai is probably a little bit bigger as far as like the e-commerce and Amazon people,
Okay.
but I would actually look at it from a little bit different of a perspective. It's like what kind of life do I want to live there? Because you can go live anywhere in the world and just work in a cubicle at a co-working space or something like that and work 12 hours a day,
Yeah.
right? Your life
Yes.
is not going to be that much different.
That's correct.
And as an expat in pretty much any country in the world, unless your country has some special agreement, like between like the UK and Canada has some kind of special agreement, you're pretty much as an expat going to have to deal with expat problems. Like you're not going to be able to get local health insurance. You're not going to be able to have a lot of the same rights. Like in some countries, you can't own land as a foreigner.
Mhm.
In some countries, you can, right? So it's going to be different pluses and minuses in every country that you go to. Thailand and Indonesia are kind of similar, but they have different pluses and minuses and rights that you have as an expat.
Yeah.
All fairly easy to deal with, but I think you should really look at it as like, okay, so all these places have a decent e-commerce community. Like, what kind of lifestyle do I want to live? Do I want to
Yeah.
maybe work 8 hours and then I want to do surfing, right?
Yeah.
Surfing, then you should go live in Bali, right? Or if you're in Thailand, then probably Chiang Mai. Like, I just want to work in co-working spaces and network with a bunch of cool entrepreneurs and stuff like that. Chiang Mai is probably a little bit better for that. So
Great.
I think you gotta, because what's the point of traveling to another country if you're going to just
Yeah.
stay in
Sit
the
in a
office and
room.
work 12 hours a day, right? It just
Yeah.
doesn't
You
make
better
any
stay
sense.
home. Yeah, for sure. I totally agree. I mean, I see people that think that moving around is the key, but so many people do just that. They go to the other part of the world and they just stay in the room, and it's like, why did you go there? The point of traveling is
Yeah, well, I'll bring
connecting.
up the point too
Yeah.
that it's like it's not like traveling. If some of you listening have done a bunch of traveling before, you probably did it when you're on vacation and you
Yeah.
probably weren't working, right? So
Yeah.
you have free time, you wake up in the morning, you're like, what are we going to do today? All
Yeah.
right, let's go surfing. Let's do this. Let's do this. And it was
Correct.
probably a great, grand old time. And that's what you have in your head when you're thinking
Yeah.
you're going to travel and work in this other country.
Yes.
Um, it's just not the case, right? You have a business to build, or you have a job to do, right? You're going to be working probably 8 hours a day or up to 12 hours a day, whatever you're
That's
going to be
correct.
doing. And then so you really have to build your life around that, right? It's not like you're just going to be showing up to a place, checking into a coffee shop for 8 hours, and
And be
then
millionaire.
going off
That's it.
and like somehow finding all this fun stuff to
Yeah.
do. Like it's probably not going to happen like that. You should probably settle into a place where you can be
Yes.
productive and still have a good life and do all the things that you need to do.
Yes. Totally. Totally agree with that. Now, to start concluding today's episode, I always like to, of course, first make a final question, which is, do you think out of all the questions I have covered today, there's a question I haven't covered? And if there is any final maybe advice or tip regarding agency growth and location independence that you have for your audience today?
Yeah, there's one more thing I'd like to mention about location independence. And I wouldn't have talked about this 2 years ago, but
Mm-hmm.
the situation in the world has changed over the past 2 years, as everyone is blatantly aware of. Is I think it's never been more important to be location independent,
Yeah,
because the governments over the past 2 years of various countries have proven that your freedom in those countries is not as solidified as everybody thought,
that's correct.
right? Especially if you live in a Western country.
Yeah.
Other countries maybe haven't changed as much, but certainly Western countries, a lot of them have like a charter of rights, or the different amendments in the United States. A lot of those have been pretty intensely bent or thrown out the window in various situations. Not just the big virus, but in various situations over the past two
Yes,
years, right?
for sure.
So I think a lot of smart people are asking themselves, like, do I really trust my entire freedom of what I'm able to do,
Yeah.
what I'm allowed to spend my money on, what I'm allowed to say on social media without getting
Yeah.
my bank account frozen, and
Yes.
if I'm allowed to leave the country or not.
Yes.
And I mean, there's all of these freedoms that 2 years ago we all took for granted that are now not so solid, right? So being location independent having multiple options for where you can live and are comfortable living around the world and still able to have your income and your job. Um, I think there's really been no more important time to actually do that, and no easier time either. Like, since I've
Yeah.
lived here in Bali for the past 3 years, there's probably at least double the amount of co-working spaces popping up. And I know that same trend has been in a lot of other places. The internet's always getting more available and faster in all countries around the world. It's really never been easier.
Yeah. I mean, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's a great advice for sure. I think now we need to be more careful in terms of location for sure. I mean, everything is happening worldwide is I mean, it's delicate. I mean, things are changing very fast. And I think for sure if you don't take that into consideration, you might end up in a country that in a few years' time it can actually also end your business due to things related to that country, right? So I think that's a very good advice. Thank you for sharing that. Now, to end today's episode, of course, I want to give you first the thank you for coming. I mean, all the knowledge you have been dropping today is gold. I mean, even some advice you have been giving the agency space is gonna help me a lot. So thank you for that. And before we finish, of course, I want to give you the chance to share all your social media channels where people can find you, also your agency. So if you can touch a little bit on that. Yeah.
Yeah, so my personal website, dannycarlson.co. And then the agency website is Kenji ROI. That's Kenji, KENJIROI.com. Then my
Yeah.
personal Instagram is probably the best place, or Facebook. They're both the same. It's I am Danny Carlson.
That's great. Thank you for coming and definitely see you on the next one. Okay. All
Awesome.
right.
It's good to chat with you, man.
See ya.